If you'd like to build a thriving community that helps the people around you, helps your business grow and profit, but not only that, really helps the well-being of everyone around you, then today's episode is for you with Dr. James Maskell. Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
How would you like to be able to interview world-class experts? Sit down and have chats with people like Jack Canfield, Marianne Williamson, Robert Kiyosaki, Tim Ferriss, you name it. Would you love to interview other people that you really admire and consider to be your heroes? Well, we've created a course for you that teaches you how to podcast, how to set it all up, and how to get going so that you can really have a successful show and you can do it properly. Over at thrivinglaunch.com, we have a podcasting course, and it's there for you, waiting for you to snatch it up. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com and let me teach you how to podcast the right way. Today's guest is Dr. James Maskell. He's the creator of the Functional Forum, the world's largest integrative medicine conference. He's lectured internationally, been on TED Med, Huffington Post Live, TEDx. He's been all over, and it's really exciting to have Dr. James Maskell today to talk to us about building community.
Hey, James, welcome to Thriving Launch. Are you ready to launch?
I am ready to launch. Great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so fantastic to have you here. We're going to talk about something that's really important. You know, as we grow a business, we need to have a community around us. And I'd love to hear from you. Where do you start when building a community?
Well, it's a really great question. You know, I really want to, start by thinking like what actually is a community and what is the difference between marketing and community building? And you could think about the difference of you could be marketing your business to get new people through the door. But I think the difference between marketing and building a community is that in building a community, you introduce your clients to each other, or you introduce other people that are interested in your brand and your followers to each other. And I think that's a big part of it. So, one of the people that sort of led my thinking on this is a guy called Charles Eisenstein, and he has an amazing quote for what community is. He says, "Community is a group of people bounded together by gifts and stories." So, the way to think of it, the way I've come to think of it is that a community is a group of people that share a story. So if you're a marketer, if you're a business, or if you're building a brand, you're likely telling a story and other people are resonating with that story. And then in order to build that community, you have to facilitate the giving of gifts. If you go back, say, a couple hundred years when we had a different type of economy, maybe more like, 500 years in the UK, let's say, but, a group of people that live near each other, they would be a community because if I give you something and you pay me for it, that's the end of our interaction. I've given you something, you've paid for it, and we're good, we're even. Whereas in times gone by, there would be systems where I would just give you something because I know that if I'm generous and everyone's generous, then you'll receive more than you give. And so that's the basis of a community. So if you think about your business, gifts and stories, you want to tell your stories and you want to give gifts. And the internet has arrived to be able to give much more scalable gifts. So you can give gifts to, that many more people at very little cost, and those gifts can still be very meaningful. So that's the way that I like to think about community. And our whole organization was built on building communities.
What interests me about this, especially as an entrepreneur, is why do you think that this is important as an entrepreneur? And then with your whole mission around helping people have accessible healthcare and healthcare that is intelligent and really is holistic, how does that play into your piece around healthcare and your business?
Well, a community, first of all, there's a huge problem, particularly in industrialized economies and particularly in America, is that, generally people are lonely. And that's a huge driving force of disease and dysfunction in our society right now. We've moved from community-based living to living in individualized homes. You source everything that you need from random strangers. The Uber driver picks me up, and the rinse guy comes to pick up my laundry. And that the fabric of society, as far as communities, has fallen away in the last 50 years. And so people are looking now to replace that through the brands and the companies that they interact with. So I would say, whatever kind of company you run, if you look at the most successful companies now and brands, they're really looking at how do we develop community? How do we have people feel like this is a place where they can be and stay? And that's important whether you're marketing and bringing people into your business, or it's the culture within your organization. How do you want the team to feel? How do you get the most out of a team? And so the theme of community with brands and companies has come up to replace the lack of community that we have in society. And so I feel that those brands that have really embraced community have grown, exponentially over the last, particularly last couple decades, but particularly the last 5 years. And so I see it as a massive theme emerging for the future of business.
Let's hear some real and practical tips on what we can do to help build our communities.
Yeah, so, I'll just tell you the story of how, our organization started. So we started a show called the Functional Forum about 3 years ago. It started off as a community of doctors who practiced functional medicine in New York. So for those of you unfamiliar, functional medicine is a new operating system for medicine that is really designed around lifestyle disease. If you get hit by a truck, you want the doctor to take care of you because they've got the skills that you need, the drugs and the surgery. If you get type 2 diabetes from eating McDonald's every day for 10 years, the doctor really can't reverse that for you. They can help you manage your blood sugar with drugs, but they can't get you back to a point of health with the typical tools of drugs and surgery. And so for diseases that are lifestyle driven, which is by far the biggest expenditure in the medical system and worldwide, you need a new operating system, and that is functional medicine. So 3 years ago, we built this functional medicine meetup group in New York, and it started off just as a New York meetup group. But then, we started to stream the show, and within 2 years, we had 200 meetup groups around the world of doctors getting together in local communities to watch the live stream show from New York. And so, what we saw is that we were able to grow our list in a really exponential way by empowering members of our community to then build their own community. So we were using online content to create offline communities. And I think that one of the most powerful things that any company can do is if you look at the people that follow your brand, or follow your company, more than likely they share a lot of similarities with the other people that come to your brand and use it. And so one of the best things that you can do as an entrepreneur is to introduce them to each other. Because if you now are starting to make real world connections of people who have the same stories, it can be a great gift to introduce people to each other. And so I really feel like that this combination of online and offline is a really powerful tool for any brand and any business. And if you're a completely offline business, you can think about how can you turn your brick and mortar business into a place where people want to come more regularly. I can give you some examples of some of our doctors who have run something like a walking club or a running club from their doctor's offices, and we learned that from Lululemon. Lululemon does that. How do you get more people who like running gear? They like, tight yoga pants, get them to a running club, and meet at Lululemon. So if you're a brick and mortar, how do you use the internet to get more people to come to your community? And then if you have an online business, how can you match people up who are in different local areas to connect in person about whatever your brand is? And I think those are really going to be are already powerful tools in growing a list, growing a business, growing a customer base. But it's a really easy way at really zero cost to give people really transformational, remarkable experiences with your brand.
In doing this process of building communities and bringing people together, actually, I was going to ask a question, but before I even say that, I want to commend you for doing that and seeing that not only as a business opportunity, but as a tremendous value add to health and to people's overall sense of community, because we all know that, or I think a lot of people know, maybe you don't know this, but a lot of people do seem to know this, is that in larger cities, there's higher bouts of depression, higher bouts of disconnection, higher bouts of people feeling isolated, and yet there's a bunch of people all around us. So when you come, James, and you create an opportunity for people to say, hey, this isn't just about buying pants, or this isn't just about buying a medicine, this isn't just about this is about community. You're really giving people an opportunity to find health, to find community, and to really find something deeper. And with that, I'm curious, as you've created these communities, I'm curious, what are some of the things that you've learned that keep these communities thriving? Because it's one thing to create a community, and then the next thing is, how do you make sure that people really do connect? And what are some of the pitfalls that people might come across as they're doing this?
I think one of the things that we're learning is we don't want to control everything the whole time. I think when you try and control the communities and what happens, one of our core values, one of the most valuable things that we ever did, Lewis, was at the beginning of our organization, we got all of our core team together and sort of brought out our core values as what do we sort of value as an organization. And one of the things was decentralized decision making. We don't want to necessarily be in charge of everything. We'd like to see decentralized decision making as a principle. And so one of the things that we're, starting to do, which is really started to unleash the potential of these communities, is rather than doing everything exactly like we say, like show up at this meetup group and sit in front of the TV for an hour and a half while you watch our show, being, as these communities grow and once they hit a certain critical mass, to be able to say, hey, get your group together, sit in a circle, and find out, what do you want from this community? What would make this work for you? So then the community becomes about the people in the community and not necessarily about the power structure that created the community. And I think that's something that we're really moving towards in 2017, because what we realize is that, we can't and don't really want to control everything, because ultimately, that I think that's part of like the old story. It's like, how much can you control and organize yourself and have under your control? And I think that, part of this new story, whether it be of medicine or of politics or of business, is, sort of handing that control back to the individual user. And so that's one of the things that I would recommend to have longevity, is that you don't pretend to know what the people need and deliver it to them. You get them to get back in control of how the community serves its members.
What is the number one thing that you would recommend that we all implement for building community?
I think, as I said before, I think the number one thing is to introduce people who share the same story to each other. One of the things we've seen, imagine this kind of thing. So you have a mother whose child has just been diagnosed with autism, right? So they're coming to the pediatric practice and, they're shocked and, trying to come to terms with the fact that this is going to be a lot harder parenting than they expected, and they're not prepared for this or otherwise. Now imagine if that doctor, can introduce that parent to another mother of a child with autism who's been living with that disease for, say, 10 years. Now you have information transfer happening from one to the other. The mother whose child is just diagnosed gets a ton of value from that interaction, because she's being told, like, how do you get them to take their medicine? How do you get them to take the bathroom? What can you do with diet to help to, improve function? All of these kind of things. That is all being delivered. And then she's getting a lot of value. The other mother is getting a lot of value, because now all the pain and suffering that she's been through for the last 10 years of having to deal with, her child on the spectrum is now being validated and used to help someone else. So that's incredibly validating for them. And overall, now both are learning the best practices. And so, what you do is you find yourself in a position, if you can facilitate that, you're adding value to everyone. There's value added overall. The patient's getting value, the one mother's getting value, the other mother's getting value, and, there's no money being exchanged at all. And so you've created that mother with the newly diagnosed child will never leave your pediatric practice, because you did something, you went out of the way to create a remarkable experience that was free for them. And that kind of opportunity, I think, is available in all kinds of businesses, because if people share a certain story, or now, starting to interact with your company and your brand, the other people that interact with your company and brand can help to reaffirm your choices, can help me to be part of a bigger organization. So, that's my one tip is get the people together, find out who's resonating with your brand, and find ways to introduce them to each other.
That's something that I did when I first started the online world, and it's something that I didn't even really know how incredibly powerful and impactful the small action was. But with creating a Facebook group and creating a community and really interacting a lot within Facebook at a time when the business was just getting started, I made a lot of introductions to people. Anytime I saw certain synergies, I would introduce people. And that for me built a really great name where people came across me and said, hey, I just keep hearing your name. I felt like I had to meet you. I asked for an introduction to you, or, hey, I hear you're somebody that really just knows a lot of different people and has a lot of different connections. And I found business that way, even though I wasn't looking for it, because eventually I became known as the guy who was the connector. I was the guy who was connected. I was the guy who was well known, who knew who to connect with who. And there's even a kind of a business within that, even though I wasn't trying to make it into a business, just by the nature of it, because I was doing it so often. Eventually people wanted to pay me for coaching, because they knew that not only were they getting access to me, but they were getting access to this large network that I had built by making all these sorts of introductions. It also really reminds me of one of this marketer that I really like. He talked about this idea, and I thought it was fantastic. I still haven't had the opportunity to do it, but for you guys listening, you maybe you want to try this at some point in your life. But he suggested, if one of you, say one of your top clients, for example, is getting married, and you know that they're getting married, offer to put together a little party for them. Like a pre-wedding party or something like that, where they get to invite some of like their close family, or it could be like a birthday party for one of your clients, and tell them, hey, why don't you send me a list and I'm going to put together a little party for you. And then when you do that, you're kind of throwing this party for them where their whole community is gathering. You're doing something that really benefits them. And then the added benefit to you as a marketer, it's not certainly going to happen, but it's a potential, is people start going, well, who's that guy who threw on this party? And then, everybody starts talking, and soon you're the guy who put on this amazing party, who's also a marketer, and people want to know who you are. And they may even want to know your services. Like, oh my gosh, like this isn't just the guy who wants your money. This is a guy who really cares about his clients and cares about community.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think being generous with introductions is a great adjunct to what I was saying earlier. That was definitely me. Before, people see what we did, like the last year, my book, we crowdsourced that, and we had an amazing launch with that. We had 50,000 downloads in the first 5 days, and people see the Functional Forum grow. We grew to be the biggest conference within just a couple of years, with this sort of innovative combination of streaming and meetup groups. But for years before anyone saw this, I was doing exactly that, like going to conferences, meeting people, finding out who was who, making introductions of people that I thought, solving people's problems. I saw the other day someone said, I can't remember who was writing it, but they were saying why they thought that when people are looking to find a business, people say just follow your passion. And he was like, I don't think that's a good idea. He said, I think you need to find the pain and, find people's pain and then solve for that pain. And so, if you're coming across people and you're asking good questions of them, you find out what their pain is. And if you have a network of people that you've met, putting those two people together is always a good fit, and it always ends up benefiting you because people always remember how they, if they make a key connection that solves one of their problems, they always remember you positively for that. So I think that's a great point, and I would highly recommend that to everyone.
Well, it's been so fantastic to be here with you. James Maskell has been talking about building community on the Thriving Launch podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. And go out and implement some of these fantastic tips, these ways that you can build your own community and make these connections. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep thriving, everyone.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there. Be sure to check out the next episode where you and I are going to sit down together and talk about living your dream life, but doing it on a budget. And if you've enjoyed this episode today, be sure that you're subscribed to iTunes and that you've left us a rating. Your ratings and subscriptions help.